morning. This is retired Senator Dick Black. Welcome to Focus on the News. Today we've got two guests, Diane Sare, who has been with us before. She was previously a candidate for Senate on the ballot in New York State, running against Chuck Schumer. And certainly, what a godsend that would be if we had Diane Sare instead of that fellow who's there now. We also will be joined in a little by Nick Brana. And Nick is the national chair of the People's Party. He was previously the national political outreach coordinator for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign 2016. And anyway, so we span the spectrum from very conservative, which I am, when social, all sorts of financial issues, everything. And then we go to Nick Brana, who's very, very liberal, and we've got Diane Sare, who is probably, I don't know whether you would call yourself a moderate or what. I'll leave that to you, but anyway, very, very mainstream individual. And anyway, today we're going to talk about the anti-war demonstration that was conducted at the Lincoln Memorial. We had some very prominent people there, and we're going to let Diane and Nick tell us about that. But first, we're going to have a special guest appearance by video. This is a video clip of the Rachel Maddow show. Obviously somebody we disagree with, but we'll have a little fun by getting her opinion on the anti-war demonstration. So with that, let's get started.
And I mean truly random rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A rally in support of Russia, I guess, given all the Russian flags, at least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there. There were some of the white supremacist groups you'd recognize from the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville a few years ago. Also represented prominently the remains of the bizarre Lyndon LaRouche cult. There were a lot of people with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. Also, at least one person who guest hosts for Tucker Carlson on the Fox News channel was there as a featured speaker. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. There were cryptocurrency promoters. It was a really weird group. It was a small rally and a weird one. But that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose change and loose electrons that's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America should be on Putin's side as he keeps invading other countries.
Well, she gives us a number of things to work with, Diane. It's interesting when she applies the label weird. I've got to say, for Rachel Maddow to call anybody weird is that's quite a flip of the coin. But in any event, why don't you tell us a little bit about your take on this, your take on the rally?
Well, what she's expressing is the freak out we saw going into the rally, which is that the great divide is being breached, that since the election of Donald Trump in 2016, there has been an attempt to make Americans absolutely hysterical about ever being seen with someone they might possibly disagree with. And of course, they never get to find out if they disagree with the person really or not, because whatever their views may or may not be, and there are, of course, disagreements, everything is taken to a total extreme so that everyone just becomes hysterical. And what has happened, I'm happy to say, is that a lot of people have decided that the threat of thermonuclear annihilation is much greater than our disagreements on all kinds of issues. And that's what you saw. And I think actually, in one sense, the comedian Jimmy Dore really got at that in his speech, because he said, you know, if my house was burning down behind me and the firemen came over to put out the fire, would I stand there with a 10-page questionnaire and say, now, wait, before you put out the fire, can you tell me, have you had your third COVID booster? Where do you stand on LGBTQ? No, you can't put out the fire until you answer. And he said the firefighters would appropriately be staring at me and saying, you are out of your mind. So this, I think, is true. Not to mention that she really, as you saw in the picture, there were 2 Russian flags, not zillions of them. And I actually only saw one of them at one time, and think that maybe NBC sent at least one of them there because they made sure to come and unfurl it prominently behind the speakers so they could say that everyone was a pro-Russian. And not that I will say that a lot of us don't agree that this was not an unprovoked invasion, but that absolutely Russia was deliberately and willfully and maliciously provoked to invade, because Putin made very clear certain legitimate security concerns he had, and the US, UK, and NATO decided to violate every single one of them. But the speakers were Americans and were there largely because we are concerned as American patriots that our nation is not upholding the principles in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And you saw that by the final demand, which is that Julian Assange should be liberated. He is a journalist merely exercising freedom of speech. He's been held now for, I guess, almost 2 years in Belmarsh prison, and he had to take refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy before. So it begins with cutting off funding to Ukraine, demanding negotiations, and wraps up with defending free speech. That's not very bizarre. I think this is something that most Americans, frankly, would agree with.
You know, one of the principal techniques of the deep state is to avoid talking about the merits of an issue and to throw out labels and so forth and attempt to smear individuals. I've seen this in the past. Any number of times I was, you know, they attempted to smear me in different ways when I was in the General Assembly, pushing legislative initiatives. In 2015, when I broke the code of silence and wrote a letter to President Assad, praising the rescue, the Army's rescue of 13 nuns who were being held as human hostages. The international media, which is linked together, it's a unitary force, they went absolutely berserk. The idea that one human being would have had the audacity to praise the rescue of 13 Catholic nuns who were captured by hideous terrorists who were beheading people and so forth was just too much. And they tried to just crush me into dust. But I'm a little bit difficult to crush, and so these things sort of pass by. Nick, it's good to have you with us, and we're pleased to see you. And we were looking at Rachel Maddow's video and her take on the event. And I know Diane had expressed earlier the feeling that it's very likely that the 2 people who showed up with, you know, head to toe Soviet flags from the old Soviet era. This wasn't even Russia. This was the Soviet Union. I despise the Soviet Union. I'll be, very honest. But I do not despise the Russian Federation, which is a totally different entity. But Diane was mentioning the feeling that those were probably plants. I've seen this thing done all the time. This is part of the left's playbook, is you infiltrate any demonstration, try to disrupt it, try to create various talking points that will detract from the actual message. Let's see, I've got just a comment here from Lima Nisovska. I apologize, Lima, for my difficulty with your name, but Lima says that President Putin, during his address, talked about the Ukraine conflict, how it was forced on them, and that Russia will keep marriage between one man and one woman, and that they'll protect their children from LGBT ideology, grooming, and pedophilia, which is a major issue because one of the things that has greatly undermined the drive towards war is this notion that we're trying to fight to impose Western values, including Western cultural values, on the rest of the world. And the rest of the world does not like American values. U.S. values are not what they used to be. So clearly the cultural strength of the Russian people, the fact that they are morally ascendant and we are morally descendant, these are issues. But Nick, let me switch to you. Nick, again, for our listeners, Nick comes from the opposite side of the spectrum. We had a great discussion the other day, and the thing is, people come together, and they come together because they have an intersection of values, and on the idea of avoiding World War III and thermonuclear war, we have come together, and I think we're in total agreement. And you would think the whole world would be, but the whole world is not in agreement. So, Nick, what was your take on the event?
Well, thank you for having me again, Senator Black, and good to see you again, Diane. I thought the event was a huge success. I thought it was pretty incredible that we had the estimates were about 3,000 people. The march stretched several blocks along the reflecting pool all the way to the White House. We had a great rally with additional speakers there. And I thought that it broke through the notion, created by the media and by our politics, that we can't collaborate as Americans, that our kind of, highest identity needs to be those political ideologies that are ascribed to us, left and right, and those labels. And we need to remain siloed and trapped within them and can't see, as Jimmy Dore says, our neighbor for the human being that they are, with the same families, the same needs, kids, brothers, fathers, mothers, sisters, grandparents, aunts and uncles. And it really broke through that. This notion of hate your neighbor, distrust your neighbor, which is manufactured, of course, to keep us divided as an American people and to keep us accepting crumbs from the oligarchs, the tiny few that control, Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. And so I think we shattered that, because on Sunday, I'm so proud that there were people that ranged the entire political spectrum. And that made me happy, because it's just a cross section of America. So I'm very proud that we did that. I also think that the fact that we were attacked by MSNBC not once, but twice, because Rachel Maddow did a segment, but Joanne Reed also did a segment attacking us. I find that to be a great vindication of the action and indication of our success, and also a show of how scared the establishment is and how brittle and fragile their hold on the American people is at this point, that they felt the need to simultaneously, it was so funny in Rachel Maddow's script, they had it in for her to say it was a small rally, like, 5 different times, trying to write it off, thousands of people, one of the largest gatherings, since the Iraq War. I think it's the largest anti-war gathering since the Iraq War, trying to write that off as insignificant, as of course they always do. But we all know that their preference is to ignore us. And so if they're attacking us, if they're moving up that series of stages, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, then you win. We're moving up those stages, and we're more of a threat to them. They're having to change and adapt their behavior, and they're having to react to us instead of us, reacting to them. Then I think that we're succeeding. And I'm very proud of that. And the biggest indication of that was not just what MSNBC did, as comical as that was. It was what Biden did. The next day, Biden went to Ukraine and met with Zelensky and stood right next to him and said, "We will be with you for as long as it takes." And no one is going to tell me that that was a coincidence, that he went the day after. It might have been planned days, weeks in advance, but so was our event, publicly announced with members of Congress, Tulsi Gabbard, Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, 3 former presidential candidates, and many other incredible people who spoke, including Diane. And so the reaction from the establishment really shows their hand. It shows that we got to them, and it shows that we're having an impact, and it shows that there is a battle taking place, as the Seymour Hersh article indicated, over the Nord Stream pipeline bombing, and also, as Mark Milley's comments have referenced, as Douglas McGregor's comments have often mentioned, when he references, the sentiment in the Pentagon, the generals don't want to go to war against Russia. They know that's suicide for everybody. That kind of conflict among the elites is spilling out into the open now. And so what we're doing is really having an impact, I think, and is changing that dynamic. And so the reaction from the establishment is the greatest sign to me that this was a huge success, and I'm incredibly excited to build on it.
Well, I think your analysis is pretty good. Maybe it was a coincidence, but maybe it was not a coincidence that Biden chose that exact moment to try to push the demonstration a little bit out of the news by, it's like the great balloon caper, where the entire nation is thrown into hysteria over some stupid balloon that's floating overhead. Apparently, we shot down some hobbyists' balloons that I don't know where you get them at some local store, and you can put a balloon up and keep it up there for several months. But we're flying jets around, shooting down hobby balloons that cost $12 a copy, and we're sending Sidewinder missiles after them. They do this kind of thing. The reason for shooting down all the balloons was to distract attention from Seymour Hersh's explosive issue or report about the United States sabotaging the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines and cutting off all of Europe from its natural gas lifeline, severing the artery, the economic artery of Europe. And it just, you know, what's going on now, I think the boys from Davos, the internationalists, the World Economic Forum people, and the all of these different globalists have decided that perhaps in order to stave off the loss of dollar dominance across the world, it is worth risking, it's worth embarking on World War III, and it's worth risking thermonuclear war as a consequence. And so you see Biden, he goes off to meet with Zelensky and do some photo ops and that kind of thing. And interestingly, you know, the State Department let Russia know in advance so that Biden would be safe. It was a deconfliction effort so that, Russia's not going to kill the president of the United States, and they wanted to make sure it didn't happen inadvertently. They knew it wouldn't happen. So he was never in the slightest danger. But then one of the things that's a little bit creepy about this, he flies to Poland. Now, Poland's a very interesting place and interesting history, but the Poles have some very serious claims to Ukrainian land. To them, this war in Ukraine is kind of a win-win proposition. They hate the Russians for historical reasons that, that are pretty well founded. But they also cast greedy eyes on Ukraine because they used to own a significant part of Ukraine. And I suspect that in the bowels of their foreign policy establishment, they intend to retake that. I think Poland intends to own a significant part of Ukraine when this is all said and done. And my guess is that they will accomplish that regardless of which direction it goes. Ukraine is not going to amount to much when all is said and done, because the Poles will come in, they'll take a good third of the whole country. And so it's interesting that, that Biden is trying to stir them up and, give them some encouragement. Hey, provide some, they've already, apparently 1,000 Polish soldiers have died fighting covertly on behalf of Ukraine. So Biden is apparently giving them the word, come on, boys, let's ratchet up. We've got to increase the level of violence. But back to you, Diane. What do you think? What were some of the common themes at the rally?
Well, the theme was the anti-war theme and also the perfidy of the United States. And I actually wanted to say that, I think it's really worse, the evil, I have to say, of not just this administration, but this policy of empire. A lot of people talk about the money that the so-called military-industrial complex is making. And that's true, but they could make a lot of money by building high-speed rail or nuclear power plants or other things that, machine tool capability is very versatile. We saw that in World War II. So you're dealing with a really evil ideology, a hatred of humankind, a hatred of the idea of human beings being made in the image of the Creator, of being distinct from animal life, by virtue of our ability to reason, not by the perfection of our physical capability, but that we are a self-perfecting species that can change, we can transform our relationship to the universe. And of course, this goes back to the old fight between Zeus and Prometheus. And Prometheus for bringing fire to man, and that's symbolic because it was fire, it was language, it was written language, it was methods of agriculture. What happened? Zeus said you're going to be chained to a rock, and your liver is going to be pecked out, eaten out by day, and regenerate at night. So it was perpetual torture. It was a visceral hatred of the good. And I'm sorry to say, but I think, and you expressed this very well yesterday in your presentation about the situation in Syria. But if you think about what we're backing, literal Nazis in Ukraine, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, we are glorifying the total destruction of the dignity of man. And I think that's really the hideous crime. And all of us may not always be able to express it poetically or as clearly as we would like all the time. But I think that's why the participants in the rally were able to come together, frankly, on such an ennobled way. I mean, it's very hard to describe the dynamic both among the speakers and the participants. I mean, for example, there was one guy who rode into the middle of the rally with a giant Ukrainian flag on his bicycle. And I watched an interview done with him later where he said, "Oh, you know, I ride around every day with the Ukrainian flag on my bike. I had no idea the rally was going on. And I just decided that, oh my goodness, here's a rally. I'll just ride through it." You know, as if that's true. Not one single person really engaged with him in any way. It just completely fell flat. People were so far above it. Everyone basically had decided to put aside all of their agreements on vaccine mandates and LGBTQ and whatever else, states' rights or whatever other disagreements everyone had. So they were already in a frame of mind to say, I'm going to be serene. I'm going to be above it. We're here for one purpose, which is to end this war. And it carried over into everything in really an extraordinary way. And I think indicates what Americans are capable of given qualified leadership, which is something I think they're really terrified of, and why Rachel Maddow would say those ridiculous things that she's trying to ridicule and downplay. We're all the dregs of society. I'm the remnant of the LaRouche cult, apparently, and you know, whatever. These are all the dregs and leftovers, and here they are. No, you have actually 4 people who ran for president, including Jill Stein, right? So already Nick mentioned very prominent, respected authors, writers, intellectuals. That was the other thing about the speakers. It was able to be elevated because all of the people there have gone through their own walls of fire, and they research, they read, they write. So it's something completely new, and that is what is so menacing to the empire, the Zeusian establishment that wants to push us over the cliff.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Ukrainian flag. I would not have the slightest problem with some people showing up with Ukrainian flags. I always found it very interesting when we would have, excuse me, we'd have demonstrators at the Virginia Capitol who were, you know, on the left flank. And I would always wade into their demonstrations and shake hands and, you know, how are you doing? And they say, oh, that's Senator Black. You know, what's he doing here? And, you know, to me, you know, politics, the fun about politics is a contact sport. I remember there was one time we had a very, very hot button issue. And at one point there were a bunch, and these were folks on the left, and they came in, they occupied the Capitol, and they came into one of the hearing rooms, and in the course of it, there was a little pushing and shoving of me, I guess. But, you know, nobody was breaking bones or anything. It's just a little tussle back and forth. And I know, you know, some people were just aghast at this. And to me, it's it's one thing if you're determined to hurt somebody. But if there's a little give and take in a political environment, I think it's a good thing. It's a healthy thing. I don't have a problem with it. And so hey, now I'm sure there was probably a provocateur who was sent with the flag, but if there are genuine people who really sincerely disagree with everything that your demonstration was talking about, let them come. Let them listen and critique and say, we disagree because of this, this, and this. But the thing is, you don't hear discussion of issues. When I wrote to President Assad in 2015 and said, I cannot explain to you why the United States, which was attacked by Al-Qaeda on 9/11, is now solidly behind them. I said, I cannot explain this to you. And I'd have been happy to have all of the people who believe that we should be supporting Al-Qaeda, which brought down the Twin Towers and attacked the Pentagon, if they wanted to say reasons why we should be supporting them, why we should be supporting an organized campaign of mass rape that had Syrian women committing suicide rather than have these U.S.-backed rebels take them into possession. If they wanted to defend that side, let them come in. Let them articulate their views, not in a screaming way, but give them time. Let their positions be heard. And so I'm sure that at future rallies like this, if there are people who are staunch believers in the Ukrainian cause, then I'm sure they're most welcome to come and hear what the concerns of our side are. So what do you think, Nick? Do you think you would be able to articulate to the crowd reasons why perhaps things are not as they're portrayed on the media?
I completely agree with what you said and Diane said. I welcome people who support Ukraine, people who've been, or support the war waged by Ukraine, which is the proxy war waged by the United States and NATO on Russia, to come, because most of them are just receiving information from the mainstream media. It's not like they work for, the military-industrial complex, or they work for, the Ukrainian government or military. They're just consuming whatever it is that is getting to them, which isn't very much. It's just because not even the mainstream media talks about it very much, even though this has become a world war, which is, in and of itself an astonishing issue. But I welcome it. And like Diane said, she might not have seen this part, but there was someone else when we went to the White House who came in with a Ukrainian flag. You did see it, Diane?
He had lost his voice. He'd been yelling so much, I think, but go on.
He came into, there was a rally and there was a circle that had formed where there were speakers, and this guy came into the came into the middle and unfurled the Ukrainian flag, and thinking, I think, that he was going to kind of like create a big a tussle or something, people looked at him, and I looked at him, and I just said, yes, we're for the Ukrainian people. We are,
Yeah.
And we just continued right along with the speeches, and nobody, nobody started anything, with them. He didn't, manage to trigger anybody. And so I thought that was great. Like Diane was saying, people were there to hear solutions. And I hope that individual, if they were genuine, I hope that they managed to take in some of the information that was shared. Likewise, for anybody who may have, joined the rally, who who thinks that the United, who doesn't really know what the context about this war, and that it was provoked by the United States and NATO, and it's continued by the United States and NATO. I hope that they had a chance to listen to the speakers, because when I was emceeing, I didn't have the chance to hear everybody, but since then I've gone back and I've listened to everyone, and the quality of the speeches was really outstanding. Everybody truly delivered something very powerful, and so I'm very proud of that message that got out. And I think it'd be very hard to stand there and listen as kind of a recipient of mainstream media information and say, "Oh wow, this didn't start a year ago. It started with a coup in 2014. Oh wow, we're arming Nazis, inside Ukraine. Oh wow, the Zelensky regime is a dictatorship. There's nothing democratic about it. Oh wow, we're striking deep inside, Russian territory. NATO's providing all of the logistics and weapons and missiles. We've spent $100 billion arming them instead of giving that, to communities in need across the country." And so I think if you were to hear all of that and the background, and Americans have been lied essentially into every war that we've fought, and every war that we've fought has been a propaganda construct. And then to think, and to know that history, and to know, as I think is now kind of mainstream, recognized in the mainstream, that the Iraq War and so many other wars, Afghanistan, the first Gulf War, Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin, all of these were premised on fictions, and were not what they were depicted, and were not what they were depicted about. They were wars of empire and hegemony and corporate profit for Wall Street. Then I think for you to know that and think, well, is this war the only exception to that pattern? I think that hearing all of that, knowing that history, taking that in, if someone comes in with an open mind, there's no way that you could walk away with the same perspective that you're being spoon-fed by the mainstream media.
Well, I appreciate what you and all the others did out there, and appreciate your remarks today. There is no doubt. I mean, the folks, I think, within that demonstration, there's nobody who feels any antagonism towards the people of Ukraine. I can't tell you how many times I've seen some picture of young Ukrainian fellows who have been killed in battle, and I find myself saying a quick prayer for them, just as I do for the Russians. I think with the people at the demonstration, there was neither any antagonism towards the Ukrainian people nor to the people who support the war. There are innumerable people who support the war because they simply don't know the truth about it. They don't understand. You get the snippets from Rachel Maddow and other people, clowns on parade. But in any event, I think you did a great thing. We will continue, and we'll be back with you next Monday at 11 o'clock for Focus on the News. This is Dick Black. You have a good weekend.